have an opportunity here to provide leadership, support, and a voice to the voiceless. The sacrifices that we made during our service do not end here. We carry on. We push forward, and we give hope and inspiration through love, community, and support. Stay free.
Rights and freedoms in this country are absolutely everything to me, because I personally know the sacrifice required in order to get them back once they're gone. So when my brothers and sisters call Stand 2, be sure I'll be there.
Legacy media will play their games, right? Like, this isn't about this or that. This is about freedom, period.
The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Brothers and sisters in uniform, whether you're a police officer, military, check your hearts. Look where we're going. Man, wake up. I beg you.
If the veterans can't stand up and get a message across to the government, I don't know who can. I don't know. But we're going to give it our best shot, and I think we have a chance to win this and do it. But we need your help, and we need you to come, and we need you to stand too. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk again soon.
Woke pirates, yes they robbed, sold out to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took out from the bottomless pit, my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs. emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs. Redemption songs. It's all I ever have. Redemption songs. Redemption songs. Redemption songs.
Hey, what's up, troops? Jeff Evely, the Magnanimous GenX'er Male, back with you now on this 31st day of July 2024. Okay, I think I am up on Rumble. I wasn't just a minute ago, but it looks like I'm good to go. All right, I had to kind of mess around with the Rumble stream there, guys. I deleted the stream, built a new one, the whole thing as the music was playing, so bear with me. Okay, Slaptown Gal has let me know that it's working. Okay, that's fantastic because I've been trying to get that thing to fire up for me for like the last 10 minutes while the music was playing. And anyway, I think we got it now. So hopefully everybody finds us on Rumble who watches on Rumble. And it looks like we got all the regulars on board with us on the other platforms as well. So apologies, guys, over on Rumble. I hope you're with me, but I have Slaptown Gal at least anyway. So that's positive. All right. So Patricia is here saying, hey, like and share, everyone. Thanks for the top cover, Patricia. I am the worst guy for not sharing my own stuff. I think I got this one out there fairly well, but I can always use the help. And Trish is saying there was no sound on Facebook. Okay. Do you guys have sound now? Something weird going on here, guys. Not sure what to tell you. Marion is saying, good evening, everyone from Ontario. And she liked and shared. Thank you very much. Andrew is saying, nice to see you back on Sergeant Major Jeff Evely. Thanks very much. I know I've been incredibly busy all summer, and I just came back. I was hanging out with my family there for a couple of days in northern Cape Breton, which was awesome. So it is summer. There's a little bit of family time, and also the fun never stops. What can I tell you? Going to a conference in Gatineau there this weekend for People's Party. So I'm going to be back on the road there tomorrow. I just got back today to kind of pack and do a stream and head back out again. But I will be fitting these in as often as I can, guys. Not going to be every day. We'll get back to that once things kind of die down a little bit. Susan is here, says, hey, Jeff, brother. What's up, Susan? It's great to have you on board. Tracy is saying, good evening from Cape Breton, everyone. That is one of my homies there, Tracy. Thanks, Tracy, for being with us. Lori says, hey, Jeff. Hey, what's going on? Marion says, good evening, everyone. Been a while. Been enjoying summer. Yes, I hope everybody's getting some time in to enjoy some summer. And the Raging Goose says, good evening from X. Good evening to you as well. Holly says, good evening, everyone. Share, thank you very much. And Cindy, our most faithful of all watchers, says, good evening, Jeff Hartz. Good evening, all. Smiley face. Share it out, folks. Thanks very much. And Faye is saying, hi, Jeff. Yes. Okay, that is cool, guys. Oh, Chet is with us over on Rumble. He says, hey, Jeff. And Grinding Attic is saying, hey, what's up, man? Thanks for being with us. All right, guys, I'm going to dive into it here. We don't want to leave Sean waiting backstage for too long. So here is C.S. Lewis. I think I've actually shown this one here before. The mask looks familiar, but I thought it was fitting for the conversation that we're about to have here. And C.S. Lewis says, of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. To be cured against one's will of states which may not regard as disease is to be put on a level of those who have not yet reached the age of reason, to be classified with infants, imbeciles, and domestic animals. And again, that's C.S. Lewis. And that's kind of where we have been for the last few years, right? It's degrading. It's an affront to human dignity to be treated like we're some kind of livestock, as opposed to being equal agents with those who rule over us. Clearly, they don't think of us that way. It's an affront to human dignity. I don't think I need to preach too much to you guys. But here is our meme for the day. We have a 6-panel meme with all these different pictures of people all masked up. They have their double masks on with their shields and their glasses on underneath. Holy smokes. The quote at the top says, "He looks ridiculous with that bandage on his ear. So unnecessary and dramatic." And that is a reference to the left's reaction to the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. They're all like, "Oh, yeah, he's just got that bandage on his ear for sympathy and to try to play up the whole thing. Oh, yeah, poor baby, almost got assassinated. Look how dramatic he's being," and stuff like that. Just classless, terrible, terrible stuff. It's not hard to tell these people want us dead. They hate our guts and they want us dead. But they are ridiculous. That is something that we have going for us, is these people are completely inept and ridiculous. Okay, and one more, I couldn't help myself. Here is actual footage of me getting the vaccine. This is the meme, and we have a picture of a hunter in a helicopter, and he's chasing after a rhinoceros. That is about what it would take for me to take that sucker at this point. And I am still a pure blood, at least, unless I've, had some shedding or something like that. Anyway, okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and bring Sean on in here, and welcome aboard, brother. How you doing, Sean? It's good to see you.
I'm doing excellent. How are you, Jeff?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. I've really been looking forward to this talk. I was watching a couple of interviews that you did before. I think our audience here is really going to enjoy what you have to say. So just for anybody who doesn't know who you are, would you mind giving us the quick highlights there? Give us the background, who you are, and your process of awakening, what you've been up to in the last few years since all of this started. Please go ahead.
Sure. Well, since I was a young man, I've been a paramedic, a firefighter. I spent 16 years as an emergency nurse and 19 years as a reservist, 17 in the infantry. I deployed to Afghanistan in 2009, 2010 on Task Force 309 with psychological operations, working with Task Force Kandahar. And I became involved politically in 2018. I ran for the PPC in the last 2 federal elections in my riding of South Okanagan, West Kootenay. And the things that I said during the last election got me fired 5 days after the last election.
That was from your nursing job?
Yeah, I was a full-time emergency nurse down here in Grand Forks.
And what about the military as well? When did you get out of there?
So it's a funny thing. So like I said, 17 years of that was in the infantry. When I got back from Afghanistan, I knew we were getting out of the fight, and I put a component transfer. And the original plan was to become a critical care nursing officer and then apply for med school, so I could have all those pensionable years as an infantier doing the fun stuff, and then retire as an Army doctor. It was an excellent plan. Unfortunately, it took the CF 9 years to get my paperwork through. And I finished as a lieutenant with 12 field ambulance out of Vancouver as an outlier. And I just one day received my retirement papers in the mail. I didn't know that I'd kind of been ghosted by my chain of command. And it turns out that they didn't like me talking about what was going on in our country. And on top of just, retiring me from the Army, my chain of command reached out and sent a letter to the College of Nurses and Midwives of British Columbia, alleging that I was being investigated for white supremacy and that I was spreading medical disinformation. And ultimately, I got a big suspension from work but laid the groundwork for me ultimately being terminated. And I've spent the last 4 years being dragged through disciplinary hearings from the college, being called a racist and a medical disinformation spreader and a liar, and for going on the news and saying that my friends weren't racist, which was the narrative that they were pushing here for emergency doctors and nurses. Guessing blood alcohol levels of Indigenous patients. They made a big kerfuffle out of this, and it was the lead story. And I went on the news and saying that this wasn't true, and this was having a negative effect on staff morale, and it was hurtful. And that seemed to be the point where my chain of command decided to get involved and end my military and civilian careers.
Was that with a 5F? They sent you your 5F stuff in the mail?
No, it was weird. So as an outlier, like I was a platoon commander for the outlier platoon, and uh, my direct supervisor got back from paternity leave after my first year with the unit, and I'd never actually paraded with them. To keep healthcare professionals on the roster, they have outliers. So you do things and paperwork and PERs and stuff like that. And to keep myself off the NES list, I decided to, reach out to the engineers and trail. They had a demolitions range coming up, and I thought I'll do medical standby, meet the guys out here, keep me off the NES list. And things were being blocked, and my chain of command wasn't returning my calls, and I was like, "What's going on here?" And I just ended up with papers saying that I was NES and I had been retired. That was
Wow,
that
like
was how I that was how I found out.
holy smoke! Like, and you
No
didn't
one
even get
no
a
one
chance to.
actually ever talked to me. No one ever talked to me. No one
So
ever collected my kit. No one ever I just got a letter in the mail saying, "You're NES and you've been retired a couple months ago."
that is
After
insane. Like, usually you
after
get a
19
chance
years.
to.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing, I don't know what your background, you were regs or reserves?
Regs, yeah.
You were regs, okay. Well, in the reserves, like civilian employment always comes first. It's a really hard balance, right, between army life, work life, and home life. And because of those stresses, they've got all these programs in place to support you for time off with work and civilian careers. And I've been advised by my own chain of command, right? You always put your civilian work first. If you can't make this exercise, you can't make this exercise. If you can't take this course, so be it. Like, work comes first. You got to pay the bills, right?
Yeah.
And to have my own chain of command reach out to my civilian um, governing body and tell lies about me,
Hmm.
um, it just, I got to tell you, man, like, army was always my getaway from the ridiculousness of healthcare and all the backstabbiness and stuff like that. Like, that was my way from all that. And to have them reach out and completely destroy my career, um, because I satisfied my professional responsibility and advocated for better care, questioned questionable practice, and supported my team. Right? People were, I don't like bullies, and they were
Yeah.
calling me and my coworkers a bunch of names that weren't true,
Mhm.
and I addressed it.
And
It's yeah.
so the names that you're being called, I think we can all kind of imagine the genre in which they find themselves. But what kind of names were they calling you? And I'm curious to know, like, on what basis they claimed to be investigating you for white supremacy.
Well, there was allegations. So my captain, Lannon DeBest, out of 12 Field Ambulance, um, he sent a letter to the college, right, as a concerned member of the public, um, worried about, that I was being investigated for being a white supremacist, and that I was spreading medical disinformation and acting in an unprofessional behavior. right? What he failed to mention is that he was my direct supervisor and my chain of command in the military, and he was a director of operations for the health authority that I worked for. So like you couldn't be more non-public than this guy, right?
Right.
And yeah, I never actually had words with him. He wouldn't return my phone calls, and I just assumed, he's Army medical. I just assumed he was lazy. But yeah, it was, every email I got from him was covered with rainbows and land acknowledgments, and I'm like,
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know if I really want to talk to this guy, and it turns out, yeah, I just I didn't know him, but he decided to end my careers. And the stuff that they were supplied, so that video that I sent you, that wasn't on the internet, right? And he had in his submission, there was a whole bunch of stuff done in military memo style format with transcripts to videos that I had done that I didn't even, yeah, I couldn't even find them on the internet, right?
Huh.
Which makes me believe that maybe this wasn't from him, right? Maybe he was ordered to do this. I don't know. But
Yeah.
at the same time, right? I think we went through a 6-month period there when we went through 4 chief of defense staffs,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, okay, well, you look at this purge that's going on, and I had members reach out to me, and it's just like, hey man, like I've been kind of following you, and I want to apologize for the way you were treated. I think this is going to happen to me here soon too. Like they're
Yeah.
purging, right?
Yes.
So it's like, and I remember having conversations at the time too. It's like, oh, so every general in the Canadian Armed Forces is a rapist, or are they cleaning house? Is there a purge going on? Right. And
Yeah, probably the latter, especially given like the rainbows in
yeah,
the signature block of this guy. Like he's very clearly a communist, and that's what he's
well, he's a
signaling.
gay rights activist, right? I
Well,
didn't even know I didn't even know he was gay when he did it, right? Like I
more
didn't know,
like
like I said, I didn't know the guy.
pride.
And apparently he didn't like my politics. And rather than
Yeah.
discuss it with me, he just decided, okay, well, we'll blade this guy, get him booted out of the army after 19 years of service.
Yeah.
And not only that, we'll destroy his civilian career as well. Right.
Yeah.
And like I said, so I went on the news and I said that my coworkers aren't racist. I've been invited on a couple podcasts to talk because of my background in psychological operations and because
Mhm.
of my background as a political candidate. I've been on podcasts talking about political things,
Mhm.
and yeah, they've been holding that over my head for the last 4 years. It's I think it's kind of telling when you look at their behavior, right?
Mhm.
Like we'll know them by their fruits. And when you look in the jurisdiction where I'm at, in British Columbia, we've got emergencies, surgical programs, clinics, hospitals closing. They're so short staffed, right? We've got an opium epidemic here, right? The leading cause of death from 15 to 59-year-olds in this province is opium addiction. Yet the government is dumping an unprecedented amount of dope on the streets where they've collapsed the prices, right? Like a Dilaudid a couple
Mhm.
of years ago would cost you $15 a pill, where now it's like a buck a pill. I was talking with one of the docs that's doing safe supply, and they're just completely baffled about what's going on here.
Mhm.
We've got an unprecedented rise in all-cause mortality,
Mhm.
right? Turbo cancers. Like you're looking at all these things that are going on that we've never seen throughout history, and we're in an existential crisis from a healthcare perspective out here. And what has the College of Nurses and Midwives done? Well, they've got one mandate and one mandate only, and that's to protect the British Columbian public. And they've spent, I'm guessing, with the size of the team they have and all the things that they've done, they're probably at about $2 million by now, dragging me through the mud, slandering me in the media, calling me a racist and an anti-vaxxer and a medical disinformation spreader because I was on a political podcast where I said Black Lives Matter makes me want to play paintball and influenza comes from China. Like it's complete and utter craziness, right? And it's just like
Well,
you've got all these problems, and what are you putting your focus on? Hammering the handful of people that actually stood up
yeah.
and spoke out during this thing, right? And it's it's really incredible. Like I think this is the scariest part of this whole thing was the lack of people that actually stood up and were publicly vocal.
Yeah.
Um, like in British Columbia here, we had, I don't know, I've heard between 6 and 8,000 nurses that were fired because of the mandates,
Hmm.
but I as far as I know, was the only person that was fired for my mouth with the mandate. Before the mandates, I got fired a month before the mandates, right? So they're
Yeah.
like, I don't take it personally, right? I was just the asshole who said the emperor has no clothes, and they're like, "Okay, well, we need to destroy this guy." But the
Yeah.
fact that it was facilitated by my own chain of command in the military and initiated by them, just, it's a yeah, that was a special flavor added into it that
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, man, like, I never saw that coming. When I opened that letter and I saw his name on there, I was just like, yeah, devastated, right?
I bet. And yeah, it is a purge, and we can see, I think, that it's all ideological, like the stuff about the medical misinformation. It's just information that discords with the narrative that has clearly been incorporated into their ideology that goes right along with the pride activism and the Black Lives Matter stuff, all Marxist movements. And it's, of course, very telling that they're going to call you things like white supremacist, and it all tracks along the lines of the Cultural Revolution in China. They just replaced Han supremacy with white supremacy.
Sure.
And
Yeah, this is we're going through our own, struggle period, right? Where they're
yeah,
destroying the four olds, right? And today they've got technology that's specifically designed for this kind of violence in social media.
uh-huh.
It's, yeah, it's crazy, man. It's crazy.
Yeah. And Patricia was just saying, give a shout out to my brother Chris. Hey, Chris, what's going on? Here's a shout out for you. Thanks for Patricia for always tuning in. And yeah, you kind of touched on. So you worked in psychological operations, and you just mentioned how we're destroying the four olds, which is what Mao advocated for: old thinking, old habits, old ways.
No
Um,
customs. Yeah.
Old customs. Thank you. Yeah. So they're destroying the four worlds, very much in line with Mao's Cultural Revolution. You have this background in psychological operations, so it must have been really interesting for you to see that unfold. You want to tell us a little bit about what you witnessed?
Well, it is. It's kind of because I'm not gonna lie. Like I've led a kind of a ridiculous life, like infantry and psyops and nursing. Like yeah, I've been a transient. I've done all these different things. I spent half my life learning how to put holes in people, and half my life learning how to plug holes in people, and and then all of a sudden, right? I find myself in the biggest psychological operation of our species as a frontline healthcare worker, where it's being implemented, and it was yeah, it was shocking to see the effectiveness of the lies, right?
Yeah.
Um, Being in the hospital and watching and working with people who were seeing the exact same things that I was seeing, yet they interpret them differently, right?
Yeah.
And their inability to, um, you know, see bullshit with what was on the news, even though what was on the news was completely different than what we were seeing in the hospitals. And to this day, right? Like if you told me, 4 years ago what would be going on today and the things that we know today, I'd be like, well, this is all over. Like everyone's going to see this. But they're not. Like there seems to be a spiritual component of this that
Yeah.
um we live in different realities, and the effectiveness of their ability to be able to keep us in those separate realities and pit us against one another, it's truly remarkable, right?
I agree.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah, I find
you
it.
know, for some people, you got a lot of military watchers, so I'm assuming most people are familiar with psychological operations. But for those of you that aren't, because everyone thinks secret squirrel stuff, and there is some of that to it, right? With intimidation operations and, you know, working in conjunction with electronic warfare to, you know, to track people and stuff like that. But basically, it's marketing, right? You identify a specific target audience and you determine lines of persuasion to get them smoking what you're growing, right? Believing what you want them to believe or behaving the way you want them to behave. And it's, yeah, it's just, it's marketing, right?
Yeah.
It's all this stuff that they figured out a long time ago and applying it in theaters of war and with the military and government institutions that aren't held back by what people would consider like decent rules, right? Acting human. And we see, like, when I did my tactical operator course in 2008 in Kingston, and when I did that course, it was illegal to conduct those operations domestically, right?
Uh-huh.
Just like it was in the United States. But under the Obama administration, they did the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act in 2012, and that basically took away the safeguards from allowing the American government to conduct those kind of psychological operations domestically and using propaganda domestically. That's when we saw the news kind of go full retard. Like, it
Yeah.
was already well there. Like, this has been a slow creep for a long time. But if you notice, things got really ramped up. And here in Canada, we did the same thing. Things really started, I started really noticing, you know, 2014, 2015. Um, that's when Stephen Harper signed us up. In 2015, Stephen Harper signed us up for Agenda 2030, where we saw that massive shift in language with the mandated speech stuff, like when Jordan Peterson got in trouble there,
Hmm.
the fourth wave feminism, and the UNDRIP stuff, and we saw a real shift in the dialogue in our nation. And that's when I started. That's when I started to kind of clue in that something was really wrong. I was
Hmm.
trading, yeah, I was a derivatives trader at the time, and just watching the news cycle in the business world and watching the demolition of the Canadian economy, going, what the hell is going on here? And
Hmm.
with the backdrop of, you know, all the mandated speech stuff and pronouns and all the other crazy things that were going on. It's to watch this evolve um into where we're at today, we've seen a real significant acceleration, and it just the effectiveness of it really surprises me.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are shocked over that. And Conan 12 over in Rumble was just saying, I'm shocked as well, continually. And so is Slaptown Gal. I'm still shocked at how easily people were brainwashed.
Yeah.
I don't think the brainwashing started in 2020. I think that's been going on for a
No.
very long time. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
um, and there's a kind of Orwellian component to it as well. And you mentioned a spiritual component. And I make these comparisons quite a bit, like the the authoritarian regimes essentially exploit the religious impulse in humans. That's why, you know, in China they're always suppressing other religions like the Falun Gong and the Tibetan monks and so on and so forth, because they essentially get people to put their faith into the state, and the state propaganda becomes a kind of dogma. And any questioning of that propaganda is tantamount to heresy, and so you just get the blasphemy reaction from people where they cry heresy and go for the pitchforks. Typically digital and financial these days. The flames are still very real, as per the mostly peaceful protests. But yeah, we essentially have a witch hunt on our hands. And people won't even like allow themselves to think critically of the regime. That's very much what we get from Orwell as well. It's like they've conditioned themselves emotionally to not even question a lot of these things that are coming out of the regime, and so it becomes like their faith, right? They put their
Yeah.
faith in the state, yeah. And so,
Well, and you have an emotional investment as well, because I don't know where you are or your listeners are on the trajectory of their understanding of what's going on, but listening to your introduction and the way you've been talking so far, it seems like you're fairly well along in the understanding of things.
yeah, thanks.
And, looking at, where we are and the amount of ground that we've covered in a really short time. Like I look at COVID-19 as a blessing now, right? It's the catalyst that's woken up the world, or not woken up the world, is starting to wake up the world. This is going to be
Yeah.
a long, arduous process, right? And for a lot of people, for the majority of people, it was COVID-19, right? For myself, it was World War II history. For a lot of people, it was 9/11. For some, it was the 2008. For some people, it was the Occupy Wall Street. For some people, it was JFK, right? Like you look throughout history, and we've had all these trauma-based mind control events. And whatever it is, the lie that you have to encounter that breaks the camel's back, right? Because
Yeah.
that was the one thing that was really astonishing to me, working in the hospitals where we'd see things like I'd see we'd have a vaccine injury and I'd be standing at the foot of the bed with a physician who I've worked with and who's a good doctor, and they're scratching their head going, I have no idea what this could be. Like we need to send them to Kelowna for a neuro consult. And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, I'll give you a video of 10,000 guys like this on BitChute right now. Like, this is obvious what is going on here." But their inability to see it, right? Because they took it, they gave it to their wives, they gave it to their children, they gave it to the 400 people that they were, supposed to take care of. And the psychological barriers that exist between them and that hard reality
Mhm.
is just for a lot of people, it's insurmountable. And, and taking all this other stuff away, like you said, the religiosity of people, you look at the strength of faith that people have, right? Like what we would typically call the faith community. But this religiosity exists. It's the same with climate change and systemic racism and all these cultural Marxist ideals that they've
Mhm.
been slowly subverting our um, our society with for well over a century. And you see this when someone is confronted with an idea that um, that challenges their worldview, right? This cognitive dissonance forms, and they've got two choices, right? You can either start to tear apart the lies, hence your worldview and your complete understanding of reality, or you can double down and just say, no, they're crazy,
Right.
right? And it's so much easier. Like the lack of intellectual curiosity and intellectual laziness that's so rampant in our culture. Um, right? And I'm sure you've been in the same position, right? Where it's like, well, what do you mean they? Right? What are you talking about? Like, it's just explain it to me. And they want like a 2-minute sound bite that will, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that you can give them that will, bring them through the fucking years of study and inquiry and mental anguish that you went through tearing apart your own worldview, right? And it's
Mhm.
just like that doesn't exist. Um, it was interesting. I recently met a guy from England who's into linguistic programming, and we've got we're starting to use these tools that have been used against us in order to be able to bridge this gap and um, help us circumnavigate the mental blocks that these people have to be able to help them to find their way in this sea of lies that we find ourselves in.
Mhm.
It's Yeah, it's truly incredible, right? Like you look at these video. I'm sure you've seen the clip, like when William Casey there in 81 said, "We'll know our job is complete," when speaking of Operation Mockingbird, which is the CIA's control of mass media domestically, right? "We'll know our job is complete when everything the American public believes is false." And it's like, we're there. We've been there
Mhm.
for a while. And this phase that we're entering into, with the abilities that AI is, you look at the speed at with which it's learning, right? Nothing that you're going to be able to consume in the media now is going to be indistinguishable, real, not real. Like, you're not going to know. And I suggest that we're already there, right? Um, you look at if you go down the disaster actor rabbit hole, right? And you look at all these staged events that traumatized us, even as young people, right? You look at these things that were complete fabrications and fictions, that were defining moments, as we grew up, and it's just like, oh, okay, that was complete theater. Okay, well, what's going on now, right? Like you mentioned briefly with the Trump assassination, right? Like, there's 10,000 people on the internet right now, speaking confidently about what transpired, and it's just like, how do you know? Okay,
That's my
so
favorite
there's
question.
right, like, so we look at these things, and unless you're there watching it in real time, and even then, they're really, really good at these performances. So was that real? Or was it a deep state? Like, to think that they'd be that incompetent to miss? It's like, okay, well, maybe, right? We look at the level of competence that we're seeing everywhere these days, and it's just like, it's
Mhm.
pretty stark.
Yeah.
But the way that I kind of judge things now is just like, okay, what is the effect? Okay, so say this whole thing was staged, right? The guy that apparently got killed was an actor, and this was all put on by the Trump administration to get that photo shot of him waving his air. Okay, that's a possibility. I don't think that's the case, but that's a possibility, right? The fact that the police and the Secret Service, right, are so incompetent that they allow a sniper to set up for 15 minutes, right, 130 meters away from the future president, right? It's like, okay, well, that seems, yeah, that seems not likely, but when he's surrounded by Rosie O'Donnell's who can't even host their service pistol, right? It's like, maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
And the fact that maybe this was just a lone wolf and they're that incompetent, right? Because the media has been telling them that Donald Trump is Adolf Hitler and we got to take this guy out, right?
Mhm.
But some 20-year-old kid that's in BlackRock commercials with an AR with a red dot that's halfway down like, it just, none of it makes any sense. And for people to speak so confidently, and this is what this is, and this is what this is, and this is what this is. So take it, we could take um, any of those situations and say, okay, number one, number two, number three is, what's the effect on the ground today? We're closer to a civil war than we were before it happened,
Yep.
right? So judging by the effects, and my biggest question when this whole thing was going on was, what else was happening in the news cycle, right? Was this a September 10th thing when Donald Rumsfeld come on the news and said, oh, we can't find $3 trillion. And then the next day you got 9/11. It's like, okay, well, what else was going on? The fact that the amount of energy that goes into this, they're so good, and it's just energy pumps, right? And everyone can see that the pendulum's starting to swing the other way, and we have this, construct of left versus right. It's like, they don't care. They play both sides, right? And you watch as the narrative shifts, all this all this, the change in narrative that started occurring, about a year ago, and um how things that are being said openly today in the media that never have been allowed are now all of a sudden allowed. um you look at all these, high level one eye club that are all of a sudden talking about Jesus, right? Like, it's just like, there's been a big shift, and you see, as this pendulum swings the other way, they're just going to co-opt their way through that as well, right? Which is why it's so important to speak truth to this madness, and call it out. I get it, like, the theater is very engaging, and it gets me ramped up too, right? They know how we're wired, right? Told the same story, 90% of us come to the same conclusion. And the few of us that came to different conclusions and warned the others, um, I think that's a moral imperative that we have, which is why I did what I did during COVID, right? Like
Mhm.
my primary goal has always been how do I protect people from bad things, right? As a
Yeah, and
fireman, a paramedic, yeah.
um, I heard a little bit about that actually, and Cisco was just asking, Sean, do you know Mark Friesen is in hospital with pneumonia?
Yeah. Um, Mark's a really good friend. After I got fired, he wound up riding a ventilator in Toronto for about a month, and I went out there and sat with him, and he's had some ongoing issues, and I talked with him a couple days ago. Um, I told his wife to keep me posted. I should check back in and see how he's doing. I haven't talked to him today. But yeah, I think he's got pneumonia and he's in the hospital right now.
Yeah, he says he's spending his birthday in hospital. Here he is. Here he was just tweeting that out,
Oh,
July
okay.
29th. Yeah. And geez, I'll show this clip here. He just put this out today, the 31st, 5:41 p.m. So here is the current state of affairs with Mark Friesen.
He did? What?
Yeah, so it looks like he's in pretty rough shape. But he
Yeah.
did tweet this out just before we went live here at 5:45 p.m. He says, "I'm in hell." He's getting a signal call from Jerry Patterson. I'm not sure what he's trying to say there, but it seems like he is maintaining a sense of humor through all this. So
Yeah.
that's a good sign.
Yeah. Mark's tough. Mark's tough. I'll give him a call after we're done here and see how he's doing. But
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully he's well. He's okay.
Somebody said that you treated him during COVID. Is that true?
So by the time I got out there, he was already on the ventilator. But given the things that were happening, I I decided to go out with him. He started to get better, and then they decided to put him on a plane and ship him off to Toronto, which struck me as odd. Um, so I went out and I was with him for the month that he was in the ICU there as a medical advocate. Um, yeah, it was it was pretty incredible to see because I'm an emerge guy, so I never really spent much time in ICU, but I was always taking care of people, not being there um, from a patient's standpoint. And it was a weird experience. It was a weird
Mhm.
experience, especially with what was going on during the pandemic, right?
Uh-huh.
Like watching, even as a watching my coworkers saying that, like if you're not vaccinated, you have no right to be able to access healthcare
Yeah.
and dealing with those kind of prejudices, right?
Yeah.
But it was kind of cool when I first showed up there. He was being treated at Mount Sinai Hospital in in Toronto, and when I first showed up, a couple nurses, they took me aside and they're like, "Hey, we know who you guys are. We're praying for you. We got you. Um, but we're only going to be here for another 4 days because they're firing us all." Um,
Over the
yeah, it
mandate?
was weird, man. It was friggin' Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we made it through. He's tough and made it through and still fighting the fight.
Um, Yeah. Speaking of just how strange it all is and what's been going on in the healthcare system, here is Kamala Harris just giving us an idea as to what the death toll has been like in all of this.
We're looking at over 220 million Americans who just in the last several months died. We are in the midst of a public health epidemic that has taken the lives of over 220 million Americans in just the last several months. We're looking at.
Wow, that's a lot of
Well, there
Americans
must
in a
be
few
some
months.
deals on real estate if 2/3 of the Americans just died. Yeah. What are we doing up here, man? We should be down there land speculating.
Honest to God, 2/3
I gotta tell
of
you,
the
like,
American population.
this is the thing. Like, it's been a journey, but I've come to love Justin Trudeau, right? I think he's the best guy that we've ever had. Because it's so obvious what he is.
Yeah.
Right. And the Canadian electorate is very ignorant. And to have people like Justin Trudeau and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and Macron and Merkel and all these Muppets, right, just kind of reveal the game for what it is. I'm hoping that we'll be able to, start to turn this around here before too long. It's pretty crazy.
It's been completely insane, and things are not trending in the right direction. Here's a little something that's been archived on the StatsCan page here. This is weekly death counts reported by Canada, all ages and both sexes, and it's color coded by year. I'll just start dropping some of these out so you can get an idea of how things have progressed. But if we look at all-cause mortality going back to 2014, I'll take 2024 out of that because that's speculative. So there's 2014, and things do tend to uptick here in January. That's pretty normal, but this is the blue line. That's 2014. I'll add in 2015 in orange, and they're roughly trending along the same kind of lines there. Same thing for 2016. Like, they don't exactly match, but they're all kind of right around the same levels for different times a year. We had 2017, and we see the same thing. They tend to go up a little bit as the population goes up.
2017 was actually a bad, I remember 2017, and you notice that's higher. Like, it was a bad year in Kelowna. I was working full-time in Kelowna, and we had 25, 30 patients in the hallways. People were dying in the hallways, right? There wasn't a single news article about it, but the ICUs were all full. The hospital was running at 140%.
What would have been the causes there? Was it just sort of insufficient resources, or was there something else going on in the
cold
population?
and flu season? Well, I get vitamin D deficiency season. Right.
Okay.
That's and there's a large retirement community in the Okanagan. And cold and flu season is always rough in Kelowna, right? It's a large tertiary care facility, and it's usually bad. Anyways, carry on.
And I do remember that being a bad flu season in Nova Scotia as well. I was comparing statistics between, the pandemic year and the 2017-2018 flu season, and more people died of influenza in 2017-18 in Nova Scotia than died of COVID in the year the pandemic hit.
And in 2015, there wasn't it wasn't a high mortality year, but it killed kids. There was a higher death incidence with young children, which we don't usually see. Right. Every year is different, right? It's always, you've got these seasons where you expect an increase in all-cause mortality and more illness. But there's slight variations, right?
Yeah, for sure. And 2018, we kind of see, roughly sort of the same trend, same line. 2019, little higher, but again, population goes up. 2020 is vastly different from the other curves. Mostly because of this spike right here, peaks in April of 2020, much higher than we see elsewhere. So that would have been just after they called the pandemic, and we can see that the number of deaths on week 17 is about almost 7,000 for that week. And then in 2021, It's not really following, like it's higher than the other ones. We don't get that spike really so much in April, but then there's this spike here in July that it's way up there, and we don't see that in any of the other years. So again, that's 2021, and then in 2022 we get this massive spike here in January, and the trend line is well above previous years as it moves through the year. So this would have been the year, let's see, vaccine passports came into effect in Nova Scotia, for example, in November of 2021. So January 2022, we have the biggest spike in all-cause mortality. So that's about a little over 8,000, whereas previously the highest spike that we saw during COVID was a little under 7,000. So that's a huge jump. And the rest of the line kind of continues above the others. And then we add in 2023, and we can see that it's still staying fairly high, higher than previous years, and continuing more along the lines of last year, absent that spike in January, but still trending upward, along with the 2022 year. So that's usually a pretty good indicator. All-cause mortality, I think that's kind of like the signal through the noise.
It's the easiest way to cut through all the horse shit, right? So talking about those spikes, that big spike that you pointed out in 2020. So when we started rolling this out, because I started paying attention in 2019, like December 2019. They were talking about this atypical pneumonia that was showing up in Wuhan and la la la, and I kind of dismissed it. It's just like, this is just more silliness, like it usually is, right? But people started putting out videos, and people that I trusted and smart people, and they were disseminating this information, and I'm sure most of us have seen them at this point. The videos from Iran and South Korea, and which now are, half of them are probably fake, and other things mislabeled. But at the time, I was kind of like, oh, is this something, right? And the more I investigated, more I listened, I was like, oh, this is bad, right? And everyone at work was just like, this. They're laughing about the run on shit tickets at the supermarket and all this ridiculous stuff. And it was just kind of like, okay. So I was kind of stealing my mind for what we were about to experience in the emergency department. But the more I looked into it, the more it didn't make sense. Like, nothing's really jiving here, right? Like, they're saying these things, but it's not, the numbers don't support that. And good people putting out good information right away, right? Saying, yeah, this is not what they say it is. And I was kind of coming around just like, oh, okay, yeah, no, they got me, right? This is silliness, just as they really started to ramp it up at work. So I was completely out of sync with my coworkers when they were just laughing about it, and this is all silliness. I'm like, actually, this might actually be something. And they're like, no, you're just fear mongering. And then just as I was kind of like, oh yeah, no, don't worry, it's nothing. That's when everyone started to go into DEFCON 5, and watching the change on the change, right? Like, you go in and you'd have okay, you got to wear a mask. An hour later, they'll come in. No, you don't have to wear a mask. You only wear a mask when you're in direct, intimate patient contact or doing procedures and stuff like that. Then come back, 3 hours later. No, you need to wear a mask all the time. And they started changing the way we were doing things. So, like I worked in a tertiary care facility. We had a cardiac cath lab, and the standard of care is door to needle, 20 minutes, right? Time is tissue. Strokes protocol is the same thing. By the time you want them up, getting the thrombolytics within 20 minutes, right? And that's a hard target to meet, right? In the chaos that's in the emergency room, like, you got to be dialed in. And we've got this news media that's telling everyone it's the end of the world. The hospitals are completely overwhelmed, and to stay away because it's a threat to your life. Meanwhile, at the hospital, we're empty, Like there's no one there, right?
Well, the
So
TikTok videos were great though.
yeah, it's like it's so crazy because people in the hospital are scared, yet they see it's empty, right? And when the cops do the drive by with the lights and sirens and everyone's out taking selfies, right? And I remember I went out for one of them, and it's like, this is so ridiculous, right? And it's like, you're all healthcare heroes, and it's like the reason why all these people are out here taking selfies with the police cars and stuff is because they've got no one to take care of inside, right? Normally in Emerge, you run your ass off for 12 hours straight. Like there's lots of shifts. I didn't get a break. You hit the ground running and you're running for 12 hours straight, right? Like it's nuts. And we, for the first time in adult Emerge, yeah, the first time that I ever worked in Cologne, like we lived between 115 and 135% capacity. That was kind of
Mhm.
like where we were at all the time.
Mhm.
And during the height of this massive global pandemic, we were at 65%. They cut back surgical slates and they just emptied out the hospital to get this big influx. And you saw they deployed the CF to Alberta, right? They put that big, huge field hospital.
Uh-huh.
Was that at the is that where the Stampeders play? McMahon I forget where they did it, but they deployed a big field hospital and they didn't have a single patient.
Yeah.
Right? But they're pumping out all this fear porn. So you look at that spike and it's like, what is that from? Well, at the same time, we're changing the way we do things, right? So I remember we had a clinical educator that comes in and she's a good nurse, worked high acuity her entire career, smart, a great nurse, right? And she's like, okay, so if we get an arrest that comes in from the community, right? What we're going to do is they'll bring them over here. We'll stop resuscitation. We'll put a tarp over them, and then we'll take them over to trauma 3, which was been set up as a negative pressure room, while everyone puts on their PPE, and then carry on that way. And it's just like, what? So you're going to stop breathing and CPR on a person who collapsed in the community because they might have a cold with a 99.97% survival rate?
Yeah.
Like, that's insane. How
Yeah.
is this good with patient outcomes? Basically, you're just removing care, right? And you could see the way the doctors were just like, well, are we going to do this? Like, they're this age. Let's make sure, like, they were super, super hyper focused on, is there a DNR here? Is there a DNR here? We don't want to do anything, right? And the amount of late stage cardiogenic shock people that were coming in because they were so terrified to come to the hospital. They've been having a jammer on their couch for the last 2 days, and they come in late stage cardiogenic shock and they just die.
Yeah.
Right. So they were able to, talk, all these people are dying. All these people are dying. It's like, yeah, we're doing things that are causing people to die. Right? Like I remember there was a Calgary doctor who got in a lot of shit because he went on the news or did a post on social media is like, if you're having chest pain, come to the hospital. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Right? And you had all these people just dying at home. So we never, like it was absolute insanity. And watching these people coming into triage, and I got in trouble. Like I've been getting dragged over the coals for this in my disciplinary hearings, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, you're lying to people. You're saying that there was no virus there. It's like, well, there wasn't, right? Bonnie, there was one time I'm down, we're doing drive-by swabbing. So you would come to the hospital and I'd be out in the parking lot all gowned up and I'd do the PCR test on you. And all these young, healthy people. And it's like, why are you doing this? It's like, well, I was up in Kelowna. Like, so? Well, there's a massive outbreak in Kelowna. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm an Emerge nurse. I like it when it's ridiculous. That's why I work there. Let's go see how bad this is. So my next day's off, I go up there because Bonnie Henry was on the news and she was saying, we've got hundreds of new cases. Healthcare workers are going down. And her words were, we're on the edge here. And I'm like, okay, let's see what on the edge looks like. So my next day's off, I go pick up shifts in Kelowna. I go there, they stick me in the COVID zone. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, go to the charge nurse, the doc or whatever, and I was like, how many COVID patients do we have admitted? They're like, none. Oh, okay. The hospital's quiet, super quiet,
Yeah.
right? And I'm senior and I go to all wherever there's a fire, that's where I go. And they were busy in triage for a little bit, so I go to triage to relieve breaks. And I got these people coming in and they're shuddering, they're crying. They're like, "I'm so sorry. I've been in I've been in my basement for the last month and a half. I'm so sick." And it's like, "Don't worry, right? You're okay. Like there's no like it's not here. Like you should have come in earlier." And trying to comfort these people, completely terrorized because the news was telling them
Yeah.
just everything they said was wrong. It
Yeah.
turns out those the 7 healthcare workers that went down were all through contact tracing and asymptomatic. So they went out to 5 of them were at the Cactus Club and they wrote their names down, right? And there was a positive test or something. And they tested all these people and they tested positive. It's like no one was sick,
Yeah.
right? And as far as admissions, so in my disciplinary hearing, they're calling me a liar for saying these things, right? Because I said this on on another podcast.
Yeah.
And in my disciplinary hearing, we used their own statistics and they've got it written down. Like there was no cases at Kelowna General Hospital for that month.
Yeah.
So everything they were saying was absolutely manufactured, right?
Yeah.
And people underestimate the size and the audacity of their lives. And coming from a psychological operations background, I know the techniques and the things that they use, right? Like we all saw the drone footage of the mass graves in New York. And
Yep.
it's like that was Potter's Field. Like they've been doing that for the last 300 years. If you've got an unidentified body, if you got a bum or someone that dies and there's no next of kin, they go into Potter's Field. Okay. So you've got a drone shot of people putting people in the ground in Potter's Field, like they've been doing for 300 years, except now they're wearing costumes and it's frontline, on the news. It's like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. And people are like, holy shit, like this is insane. It's like,
Yeah.
no, it's people doing ordinary day to day things wearing costumes. And it's being framed in a way to terrorize people. So if you're a government, say we had a real pandemic, and for all the viewers out there that I'll clue you into how you know that you're in a real pandemic. There's dead people everywhere. Okay, that's
Yeah.
the first indicator. And your government would be on the news every day saying, "You know what? Don't worry, we got this." Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, things are shitty right now, but we're good to go. We're going to make it through this. We're going to do what needs to be done. We've got you. We've got you, Canada. That's what leaders do. Right? When you go around and everything looks copacetic to me, everything's good. Let's go, right? And it's like, no, it's a world ending pandemic. You got to hide in your basement. You got to wear masks, right?
Yep.
You can't have sex with your wife without a mask on because that's dangerous. Karaoke is the threat to national security and all this other ridiculous shit that they're saying. But they say it so often and so consistently, and because almost everyone works for the government in some capacity at this point, right?
Yeah.
It's just this you see this unified front and people fall in line.
Mhm.
And that's how tragedy happens. All right. We've seen where these mechanisms have taken us in the past. And, man, and like you get it. That's why you're doing what you're doing. I mean, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like I'm a shit politician. I just tell people, I'm trying to tell people, I think my threat analysis is better than theirs. And I
Yeah.
talk to people, and try to accurately explain what's going on,
Yeah.
right? But at my heart, I'm a soldier. And what's a soldier's job? A soldier's job is to advance on the sound of the guns. And in this fucked up 5th generation war that we find ourselves in, the sound of the guns is politics and media.
Yeah.
This is the front line. Don't get me wrong, we're going to get to a kinetic phase eventually. And then there'll be other skill sets that'll be used. But right now, we have it's like that guy in Plato's cave, right? You go out and you see reality.
Mhm.
And once like it hurts at first. the sun burns your eyes and you're like, this is all fucked up. What's going on? What's going on? Right. And once your eyes adjust to the light and you figure out what the fuck is going on, you have a moral imperative to take the message and go back and warn the others. Right. Unfortunately, they try to kill you for that. Right.
Yeah, they
That's
do.
the way that archetype goes. It seems like in every story, right? It's just like, yeah, it doesn't go well for the guy who tries to tell you. But
Yeah.
you know, for those of us that see it and have the ability to articulate it, I think we have an onus to warn people, right? And that's
Yeah.
the only way that this ends.
Yeah. It's a duty. I think I feel a sense of duty to warn people. The soldiers are kind of like the sheepdog here in this situation. And I see a lot of what they've been doing. I think that veterans are probably a target in the Psy-Op as well, in terms of,
For sure.
marginalizing us, because we would be the ones who would be the most likely to stand up to this communist coup. And we see a lot of like the stigmatization of veterans using the mental health card and things like that. And to a lot of the sheep, it seems that the sheepdog look like wolves, and the wolves themselves are in sheep's clothing. So it's a really difficult kind of hand to play. How do you think we break through that?
Like I said, man, we need to keep telling them, and we need to do a better job. Like I look at my lack of effectiveness in this. I couldn't even convince my own family not to inject themselves, right?
Yeah, me neither.
And as a frontline healthcare worker, telling them the stories that I've seen, and it's just like, throughout this whole thing, I haven't really talked about vaccines that much because I'm not a scientist. I'm a soldier and a nurse, right? You want to learn about the ins and outs of vaccines? There's 10,000 documentaries and world-renowned scientists that on the internets that'll tell you all about it, right? I just talked about my observed reality, and the refusal for for my friends and family to take to heart what I was saying. Like, it boggles my mind, right? And this is the thing that's so alarming, right? And you look at this, and this is the struggle period, right? So, and by no means, like, I'm not alone. Like, there's thousands of us that went through this, but I just look at my own scenario, right? Like, I carried a gun for this country for 19 years. I deployed, right? I've been a firefighter. I've been a paramedic. I've been a nurse, right? Like, everything that I've done since I was a young man has been in service to my nation and the communities that I live in, right? And, at work, I was a senior staff. I mentored new people. I was the go-to guy, right? People would come to me if they had a really sick patient and wanted advice, or, things were going sideways and they needed some help, or, right? I was that guy. And it was funny. I went out for coffee with a friend of mine about 8 months after I was fired, and I was pretty well liked and respected at work. And she's like, "They still talk about you, eh? Like, they hate you." The the ability to throw someone like that away, not just one person, right? To throw thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people like that away. Um, there's a mechanism in place here, right? So you look at the purge that went through. I was talking to a buddy of mine. We did basic together. He was a lot younger than I was, and yeah, I love this kid like a younger brother, right? And he's still in, and he's starting to see. He doesn't want to see, but he's starting to see, and we're having a talk, right?
Yeah.
And he's talking about the tampons in the bathroom,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, okay, so say I was one of your young lieutenants that was in your charge and you're supposed to mentor and bring me up, and I come to you and I'm like, Captain Forrest, there's tampons in the bathroom. Like, what the fuck? We're engineers. If we don't base our things in reality, people die, right? If we don't base our calculations in reality, building that bridge, it's going to collapse and people are going to die, right? If we don't act according to reality, people will die. What are we doing here, right? And he's just like, I don't know what I'd say to that. I'm like, well, don't worry about it. You won't have that because all of those people have been weeded out, right? That's what these mandates have done. So you look at all these fired nurses. So British Columbia, a couple days ago, Bonnie Henry just announced that she was waiving the mandates, right? So the last jurisdiction in the world is just like, okay, well, there's an election coming up, so we're going to waive the mandate. But there's still mandates in place, right? Like the legislation that they've passed, I don't think a lot of the people are going to be allowed back unless they take the knee. But when you come into the emergency department or whatever, into healthcare, like there's different personality types, and there's people there that are just, coasting to collect a paycheck. There's people there that are, enthusiastically trying to help you. There's wide varieties, right? But you need people in these large systems that will advocate for you, right? That will stand up and like, no, this is horseshit. We need to do this better, right? And they've effectively removed all those people, right? So say, with all the climate disasters that, we're going to be experiencing and going to continue to experience. So aid to civil powers, right? And you look at the emergency legislation that they're passing here in British Columbia, but across the country, where you can remove people from their property, you can destroy crops, you can destroy buildings, you can do whatever you want to do, basically, as long as someone says the magic word emergency, right? So if you're a platoon commander and you're deciding, it's like you need to remove these people from their homes, right? It's like, okay, well, these rules, they're not law, they're not backed up by the Constitution. Sir, this is an illegal order.
Yeah.
Right?
You're not going to find those people anymore.
No, they've been effectively moved. So what these mandates have done effectively is they have removed all the people like us from the military, from the police force, from the healthcare system, right? And you look at you look at the last century, what we did, and like that wasn't governments, that was people. People did that, right? And they know how to lay the groundwork to make those things happen. And I see it happening in real time here by removing all the safety nets from the institutions and getting the people out. I forget who it was who said it, but he's like, in all of my studies of communism, it was never about believing the lie. It was about making you complicit in it. Okay. So I'm sure we've all had those experiences over the, through the mandates where we compromised on what we know just to get by. Like I remember one time I was going into Lordco to pick up some oil for an oil change. And I'm just like, I just don't want to be fucking yelled at. Because I'm going around everywhere not wearing a mask, right? And everyone's fucking yelling at me and treating me like an asshole. Right. And I'm just I just want oil, man. I just want oil. And I went into this Lord Cole and I put a mask on and I came out and I felt like such a piece of garbage. For like a week. It bugged me. I'm just like, you're such a pussy. You compromise. And I wear a mask every day at work. Like that, I did that before the mandate, right? Like I'm used to wearing masks, but it was just the idea of it, right? And that's how the demoralization occurs. So for all those people that do this, and it's like they put the mask on and they know it's horseshit. But that cognitive dissonance that they experience and that demoralization, like it kills a little piece of your heart every time. And it gets easier every time. Right. And that's how these things happen. Like it was Voltaire who said, those who will believe the absurd will commit atrocities.
Yeah.
Right. And this baby step increment. So when you're when you're on there and it's like, okay, you need to put your mask on, and you're just like, this is horseshit. And then your sergeant comes aboard you. He's like, put your fucking mask on, troop.
Yeah.
Like, okay, put my mask on. And then every time it gets easier. Now you're just wearing a mask. That's just the way it is. You normalize quickly. And
Yeah.
that's how these things progress. And now we look at these institutions where they've eradicated the people that are safety nets within those institutions, and who knows what they're going to do with them. You look at the Trudeau government; they've decimated the Canadian forces so badly that they're
Mhm.
allowing permanent residents in now, right? So you
Mhm.
look at the millions of fighting age males that they've brought in from sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East, and they can
Mhm.
just start handing out PR cards.
Yep.
Right? We've always had a really small army with a huge officer cadre, right? It's built for a quick, just add water kind of army, right? You've got this massive amount of officers, and all you have to do is bring in a bunch of people, train them up with basic training, and you got an army that's good to go, right? And you look at the conditioning that's been gone, like this doesn't end well, right?
No.
This doesn't end well. So
Well, yeah, it just on that point, it's like you say, like they're bringing in, they're bringing in all these permanent residents from basically the developing world. They come from, I think what we're talking about here is a little bit more culturally authoritarian societies. Like politics is downstream from culture, so really the
Totally.
authoritarianism it starts in the culture and makes its way into the politics. And everywhere in the world where we see these authoritarian regimes, like it's not the case that it's a single strong man that's not dominating the population of an entire country. It's always the case that he has support. He has broad support in the country. It's more like a dominant tribe that is dominating everybody else. And we see that happening right now with essentially the progressives. The progressives are kind of like the dominant tribe in this situation, and they're growing increasingly authoritarian, as we can see. I mean, like it's they have power over reality, over people's minds. Like they're hell bent on, like you say, getting them to play the game, if you will. Go ahead.
Yeah, like speaking of tribes, like we're not tribal anymore. That's been beat out of us, right?
Well, we're kind of the
And
only ones too. Like
yeah, I know, right? Like
barely out of the woods.
as far as tribes go, right? You look at like the Jews, right? That I don't think anyone's going to out tribe them, right? But you look at the Muslims, right? And watching these artificial divides that were created by the Brits, a century ago, to control them, the split between Shia and Sunni, and that's closing, right? Like they're starting to come together, right? And they're very tribal. But you look at like Christianity, like there's 10,000 denominations, none of them get along, right? You're a heretic church, you're the apostate church, you're this, you're that, right? Like there is no cohesiveness there. And you look at all these different ethnic groups and this is what they do. This is what they did in the Balkans. This is what they do everywhere, right? You bring people that are very tribal into high trust societies that aren't tribal at all, that have had that beat out of them. And it's just like, okay, well, where does this go? It always goes to the same place, right?
Yeah.
And to realize that this is not, they want us versus them. Right? You look at these plans that have been written down for, over a century, and it's just like this is the game plan. This is how they do what they're doing, right? But most of the people involved in the plan have no idea about it, right? They're just using our own human nature, how to program us, how to get us to fight each other. They're very good at it, right? And this you know like it's absolutely insane for people to cheer for things that are leading them to their own destruction, right? Like diversity is our strength and all these ridiculous things that we say that are complete inversions of the truth, but
Yeah.
people believe, right? And if you don't believe it, you're a hateful person. It's like,
Yeah.
there's no hate in my heart. It's just like, this is not true. It's like,
Yeah.
no,
Hate is
you're a racist, or you're an anti-Semite, or you're this, or you're that. And it's like, okay, well, and the changing of the definitions of words. You look at this happening in real time, right? Like for the pandemic, they changed the definition of what the word pandemic means in 2008, just before the last fake pandemic of H1N1, where it had nothing to do with morbidity and mortality, but it has
Mhm.
to do with caseloads, right? And you got a PCR test that is not diagnostic of anything. You just dial it up enough to get the amount of cases that you want to be able to act politically the way that you want, right?
Yeah.
And by changing the definition of words that we take, like white nationalist is a terrible person. It's
Yeah.
like, what? I'm a white nationalist. I signed up for unlimited liability in the defense of my nation. I'm a Canada First guy. Of course I'm a nationalist. Why else would you join the army and serve your nation? Right? And I happen to be white. Is that a bad thing? Right? And it's just like the way that they twist things around. It's like that's what a white nationalist is. It's a white person who believes in his country.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just like, and that's the biggest demon out there right now. And it's just you watch them manipulate what words mean, and then people flee out from underneath the definition of those words to remain politically correct and acceptable in society. And it's just, yeah, it's just like people need to wake up to the mechanisms that they're using to control us, right?
Yeah.
But it's, you look at where we're at now, right? And I just feel so blessed that I see it. And a lot of the people that I run in today are, are starting to see it, because there's a lot of people that are, they're terrified. They're terrified of COVID-19 and systemic racism and cow farts and all these things. And it's just like, okay, you have real threats.
Yeah.
Like look at what we've done. Okay. So we've injected about 85% of our nation with a technology that looks like it's not going well. Okay, so you look, so my I was an emergency nurse for 16 years. I never had a case of myocarditis. I had one case of pericarditis once, I believe, but I don't remember ever having a case of myocarditis. They roll out those vaccines and we have millions of
Mhm.
cases of myocarditis all of a sudden. And the
Mhm.
news talks about it like it's a cold. Oh, it's a mild case of myocarditis. There is no mild myocarditis. Myocarditis is an inflammation of the heart, usually secondary to a viral infection, but it can happen with vaccines as well, right? So if I remember correctly, 5 years post myocarditis, you have an 80% morbidity and mortality rate. So that means out of every 100 people that had myocarditis, between 80 of them will be dead or a cardiac cripple. Okay. And for every clinical case, you had Stephen Pellick. He's a scientist at UBC and all this stuff. He's been researching all this stuff, and the literature shows that they believe that there's at least 4 to 5 subclinical cases for every case that goes to the hospital. So if you're a young guy and you're out playing soccer and you're having chest pains and you go to the hospital, you got
Yep.
myocarditis, okay, bed rest and all that stuff. But you're an accountant and you're by the water cooler and you're like, oh, I got a chest pain. It's like, whatever, you shrug it off and you go, and you don't ever end up going to the hospital. You've still had myocarditis. It was just considered subclinical, but the outcome is the same, right? So we have that ticking time bomb. So we're 3 years in
Uh-huh.
to a bioweapon that's been deployed with a 5-year fuse. And that doesn't take into account all the coagulopathies we're seeing, the microemboli eroding people's frontal lobes and impacting them cognitively, the turbo cancers, all these other things, the autoimmune things, right? And you look at this and it's like, okay, how is this going to end? It's like, well, you couple that with the fact that we've brought in several million people the majority of them fighting age males. And right now our government is engaging in a program where they subsidize 70% of their wage, right? So if you have a construction site, you can hire new Canadians, right, and get 70% of their wage refunded to you, or you can hire a Canadian. So a lot of people are, we do that. We incentivize corporations to do this. And I know out here, like a lot of companies, they've got these guys on the payroll and they're not working. They're just, getting the subsidies, and then they split the check afterwards, and they pay the employer back, 50, 60% of their check.
Yeah.
No work's been actually done. They're just abusing the system because
Yeah.
they come from low trust societies where you scam wherever you can scam.
Yeah.
Okay. We've quintupled the money supply in the last few years. It's
Mhm.
just like, you don't have to be a great economist or, a medical researcher to be able to see these things that have been done and know that there's going to be negative outcomes for this.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, and speaking of negative outcomes, like you mentioned, the 5-year fuse on the bioweapon that's been deployed, and I tend to agree. Like I'm putting in those terms as well. Like 3 to 5 years out is when we're really going to see, these massive spikes in death. And here's another all-cause mortality graph here. This is from Mortality Watch. And it's age standardized mortality. And, the thing is that different countries, populations, they have different demographic makeups. And so we have like an older population with the boomer generation coming into retirement in Canada. And so they adjust for that so that it's a more, useful representation of all-cause mortality trends. And here, this graph here, it starts at 2014, and it's in deaths per 100,000. And so we have 794,000 deaths here, adjusted for age in 2014. And the line kind of trends along that range there. We have the dash line that is the forecast for the average. And as you can see, it just sort of gradually declines, which is the trend throughout history. Is, the life expectancy goes up, and we tend to see people dying less and less of more treatable illnesses as our understanding of proper treatment and technology improves. So that forecasted line continues to trend downward gradually. But as we can see here, it really starts to diverge right around 2020. Like these data points, it goes from 794,000 to 790,000, 784,000, and so on. So they kind of bounce around up and down on the forecasted line, but they're pretty close the whole way. And then we see this divergence here in 2020, which is what we would expect to see in a year when a pandemic hits, and it goes to 801,000. Now that's quite an uptick from 762,000. I know, Aaron, I'm not supposed to say uptick. Apparently that's a communist word. It's news to me. But anyway, we see this increase here from 762 to 801,000. So that's quite a delta between 2019 and 2020. But 801,000 isn't astronomically higher than 794,000, where we started in 2014, even still. And then it goes down a little bit in 2021, presumably because some natural immunity is setting in. I know it did for me in January of 2020. So it goes down a little bit in 2021, and then they go and they roll this vaccine out in November, or the mandates out in November of 2021. And then from 2021 to 2022, we have this massive increase from 792,000 deaths to 833,000 deaths. So that's a difference of like 41,000 deaths, a spike in 41,000 deaths in all-cause mortality from what is a pretty normal number here around 792, even though it is quite a bit higher than the forecast was just a few years ago. And then it comes back down to about 795, I'm thinking, after people have gotten we've moved past just going berserk with a lot of these injections, except for the real diehards and whatnot. But it's into everybody now around in the 2021-2022 timeframe. And so around 2026 to 2027, we're going to be looking at some pretty dire circumstances. What do you think?
Well, when I see the predictive programming, for H5N1 and the SPARS pandemic of 2025 to 2028, and you look at all these things, it's like they seem to be laying the groundwork to be able to hide deaths.
Yes.
I look at what's going on in Israel right now. I look at what's going on in Ukraine right now. I look at the things that they're doing. You look at the polls in the United States, and they're talking about bringing back the draft because recruitment is so poor. And the polls are saying that like a high percentage of Americans would rather fight their own government than go join the army and fight for the government. They're expecting to hide in the chaos. You look at what's going on here in Canada, right? Like the delays of what's happening, like with my disciplinary hearing. Like I've been waiting for 8 months now. Like we're done, and they won't come out with a verdict. Dr. Hoff, whose case will be better than mine because they actually are going to address a lot of the science behind the COVID-19 stuff. They keep postponing it because they don't want it to happen. You look at all these things, these delaying tactics, right? Your military, you know what delaying tactics are, right? You send out small parties to, molest the enemy's main body as your main body, gets the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah.
And that's what I see going on right now, right? We've got this bread and circuses, this theater that we're watching as they consolidate their position. You're all these billionaires building their underground bunkers and shit like that. And it's just like they're expecting some chaos. And at this point, I think it's safe to say that, there is some darkness coming. Like you don't do all these things and have nothing happen, right?
Yeah.
We're already seeing they're really good at controlling and committing fraud. Like you look at the fraud that's gone on in commodities, especially the metals. There's so many thumbs on the scale, and to be able to artificially suppress the price of silver, the price of gold, stuff like that. You look at their ability to carry on with this fiat currency, and it's just like, are they going to be able to kill people fast enough to maintain this a few more years? I don't know. Their ability to commit fraud is pretty amazing. So how this cookie crumbles, this could happen. Yeah, this could happen 1,000 different ways. But you look at all these things building, the fact that people are becoming more aware of this every day. Having been involved politically since 2018, I got to say it's quite encouraging. Because when I started, like I'd go out to speak and there'd be 4 guys show up and 3 of them got tinfoil in their hat. And it's like, we've been here for 30 years. Where the hell have you been? Right. And I didn't know anything about anything. I just got in. I was like, something's going on. Right. But we've covered a lot of ground in the last few years, and people are starting to figure it out. And these legacy political parties, people are going to continue to vote for their team because their team's awesome. And it's like, those people are becoming fewer and fewer as more of them start to figure out what the game is, right? If you think Donald Trump is saving the day, or the white hats are in control and they're going to, show up with freedom and money for everyone, then you haven't been a very good student of history, I don't think, right? If you think Pierre Poilievre's going to save the day, and it's just like, well, I'd like to remind you, it was Brian Mulroney in 1992 who signed us up for the Rio Declaration, with Agenda 21, the worldwide vision for global communism. In 1992, it was Stephen Harper who signed us up for the Sustainable Development, signed it into law in Canadian legislation in 2008 with the Sustainable Development Act. And it was Stephen Harper again who signed us up in 2015 for 2030, right? Like, this is just an alley-oop for Trudeau. This is 30 years of Conservative Party groundwork. They're all owned and operated by the same people, right? And the PPC, for the first time in Canadian history memorable history anyways, maybe it was like this 100 years ago, but for the first time people were given the opportunity to vote for people that weren't politicians, right? And you saw there was a lot of military in the PPC, right? There we had carpenters, we had like all different walks of life, healthcare people, right? People that saw what was going on and they wanted to stand up. And I look at it's a non-whip party. I look at it like as a bunch of independents. Right now, I'm going to be running in the next provincial election in my riding as an independent because the teams are all captured out here, right? Corinne Maury, another fired nurse. She's running in the riding next to me, right? She's been taking it to the union for the stuff she's uncovered is incredible, right? And she's been in the fight for the last 3 years, right? Pointing out that the BC Nurses Union took more money from the government than they did from their own registrants, their own membership, right? He who pays the piper calls the tune, right? And we have to realize that these political parties, they're all on the same team. They've all been bought and paid for. And if we have any hope of slowing this down, because nothing's stopping what's coming, but if we start making better political decisions in this country, it's going to start when Canadians start voting for people that are telling the truth. Right. And in order for that to happen, there has to be at least one person on the stage that's telling the truth. And right now, I feel that's my job in my riding. They're going to have that opportunity. Most of them aren't going to want to hear it. I live in the Kootenays, man. Like but they're going to have that opportunity. Right. And in Corinne Maury's riding and in the riding to my north, we got a retired dentist who's been in this fight for a few years too. Right. We've got people that are standing up. And, the majority of people still think, well, we just got to get Trudeau out, or, oh, well, we just got to get David Eby out, right? We've got to vote for the lesser of evil, right? It's like, you need to have discernment. Right? Discernment isn't being able to tell good from bad. It's being able to tell good from less good. And, voting people out, why don't you vote for people that are telling the truth? And we've been shown, like, that's the thing that's so crazy. And I know you're a PPCer, right? So Max got arrested, but Max wasn't a sitting politician, right?
Yeah.
He was going around talking. We had one person in this country who was a sitting politician who spoke up loud about this, Randy Hillier. And they're still trying to put his ass in jail.
Yeah.
Right? One guy, there's 338 in the House of Commons. We got 93 out here in BC. Like, there's 2,000, right? Across the country in provincial and federal legislatures. And we had one guy stand up, and they're still trying to put him his ass in jail. Right? They picked the wrong guy. Like Randy, he's a fighter, right? Okay, well. What hill we done? All of them. Fuck, let's go. Right? Because once you see this fight, once you see where it leads, and once you see what this is, you're all in. Right? Where are you gonna? I'm not motivated by fear, fiat currency, or what people think about me. Right? I'm motivated by the good, the true, and the beautiful. And we need people standing up and speaking to this madness. Because if we start to do that in large numbers, I think this goes away. Right? That's the whole frustrating thing. This whole thing, whatever this matrix or simulation or whatever the hell this is, it's one of choice.
Yeah.
Right. And if you choose not to be afraid and realize it's just like, okay, this is a test. We're here for a reason. Okay. And it's to, stand up and be light. And you see this darkness gathering. It's just like, well, if we get enough people standing up, this goes away. That's the frustrating part, right? This goes away
Mhm.
the second enough people stand up and say, okay, enough of this nonsense. We're going to do something different. But
Yeah.
their ability to use fear as a control mechanism, it just, yeah, it's incredible. And the choices that people are making because of those fears is ultimately going to be their undoing.
Yeah. Yeah. Act out of fear and you will live to regret it. And I think I've heard you talk about this before. It's like, the the struggle that we're in right now, like we're not the first generation to have to go through this. And it does seem to be the case that this is kind of part of the human condition. And we, once in a while, we really need to rise up and like tyranny is the default on the human species, and so many have gone before us to overcome that and provide something better for the next generation. And it seems like we're a people that's been singing "We stand on guard for thee" our whole lives, and thee are the people who went before us, the veterans in particular, who died to provide this great civilization that we have now. And it does seem that we're in a stage of end empire, the likes of which we've seen all throughout history. And I think I've heard you kind of talk about this previously, but do you mind giving us a few thoughts on that, just for the benefit of our audience?
Sorry, say that again.
Yeah, the kind of cosmic battle that we're in right now, and how this seems to there seem to be a lot of parallels between the current crisis and say going all the way back to Babylon, the end of empires. It's a very similar struggle, I think, that we see repeat throughout history, and it seems like it's just our turn to have to struggle with this, because it is part of the human condition. And so it's not new, but it's new to us. And I think I've heard you
Yeah.
speak about this a little bit before, and I just kind of like to get your thoughts on that now.
So it's interesting. Is actually an ex-military buddy who I'll steal his line, right? And he's like, "This stuff's like rust, right? It occurs naturally, and we see these forces pushing us in this direction, and it just kind of this happens naturally, right?
Mhm.
Freedom and righteous empires, right? They're forged in fire. Like it takes work and usually violence, right?
Yeah.
And this kind of thing, because it's decay, right? And this is what's so challenging about the job that we have. Like it was um, Mark Twain who said, "Yeah, it's easier to fool someone than convince them that they've been fooled." And I go to do these political things, right? And I'm trying to tell you, like, yeah, the sky is falling and all these threats exist. And it's like I'm driving through paradise to get there. Like I'm out in the Okanagan Valley. I don't know if you've ever been here, but in the summertime, it's like blue skies. Yeah, 100-mile long lake. People are water skiing. Like it's paradise. Like people come from all over the world to come here, right? And then I show up. It's like, oh no, it's the end of days. Really, it doesn't look like it. And it's like that cottonwood tree, right? You've grown up with it. It's been there your entire life. You build a tree fort in it. You hung swings off of it, and it's there. And it's this big, beautiful tree. And then one day, a storm comes up, and it blows over and takes out your house. And you see inside of it once it falls over, and it's rotten to the core,
Yeah.
right? And
It's been hollowed out.
when I look around, that's what I see. I see momentum, right? They have been hacking at the foundations of our civilization for a very, very long time. And the reason why we've experienced this acceleration where it's, most of this stuff, you look at these incredible men that have brought this about, like Cecil Rhodes, the roundtable movement, and like all these huge people that, you know, were working in the shadows and maintaining this fight beyond our event horizon, where we saw like all this stuff was happening in the shadows. And then you're like, well, why do we see it now? And I think it's multifactorial in causation, right? Like everyone that was involved in World War II is dead.
Hmm.
And the amount of stuff that has been released and declassified in the last, 10, 15 years has turned the narrative on its head. Like we have, like that's one of the touchstones that we have growing up, right? We're the good guys. We went over and we saved the world from tyranny. Well, did we? Because it really seems like we fought for the people that are doing this now. And once you start to see that, right? This falls apart, right? We've got the internet. They've been desperately trying to control it, and in Canada, they've been quite effective recently. I don't know if you've noticed, they've got a pretty good, control on the dissemination of information right now, but they've been desperately trying to control it. But this information has been getting out. And I think also contributing to it is the cohort that we're dealing with, right? Justin Trudeau is no Cecil Rhodes. He's no Pierre Trudeau, right? You look at these Muppets, and I think the old guard doesn't have a lot of faith. It's just like they're looking around. It's like, holy shit, like we've been doing this. We've been building this cage for the last 400 years. And it's like, I don't think these retards are getting the ball across the line. Like we need to speed things up. And this acceleration that we've seen has revealed the game. And for myself, being confronted with, the lies of World War II, which I studied World War II history in university, a proud member of the Canadian Armed Forces for 19 years, where we study our history and celebrate our battle honors and all these things, right? Coming to realize some of the lies that we've been told about that's what broke me. And I realized that in order to move forward and have any integrity as a man, coming to recognize these lies forces me to reevaluate everything. And once I started doing that, like weird shit started happening. I just have these weird conversations and come across these weird things that would take me in different directions. And like, man, like I was an atheist my entire life, right? I was involved, yeah. I was educated in the Rockefeller healthcare system. I got involved in politics, and now I believe in God, and I bought a farm, and I'm trying to prepare myself mentally and spiritually for what's happening. And when you peel back, I think we're in a situation right now where it's impossible to know the truth, right? But if we seek it in our hearts, and that's one of our core principles, is like to seek out the truth, I think we'll find our way. And I got to tell you, man, like the way people are coming together right now. I did a speaking engagement. We had a little fundraiser out here in Grinrod, and Dr. Mark Crosby came out. Dr. Hoff was there, and a bunch of these guys. The few people that that spoke up. And it's so few, we know their names. We know their names. We know the names and the ones that did it in Britain. We know the names of the ones that did it in the United States, because there were so few out of the hundreds of millions of people that work in healthcare. There was what? A handful in each country that stood up, right? But whenever I'm around these people, it's like we've all come to the same conclusions, right? And it doesn't matter how you get here, but we're all arriving in the same place. And I don't think that's an accident. I see purpose in things. And we're inevitable, right? I'm extremely hopeful about the future. Like we've been talking about some end of the world shit here today, but at the same time, right? Like this is we've entered the crucible, right? And we will know people by their fruits. And it's being revealed right now. Whatever's happening, the level of consciousness on this planet is rising, and we're starting to see more clearly. And this event horizon that, I don't know about you, like when I grew up, I thought, Jean Chrétien was the boss, and Brian Mulroney, and Stephen Harper, and right, Donald Trump, and George Bush, and like these guys were running the show, right? And we see further now. And it's like, okay, well, the World Economic Forum, that's the one that's penetrated the public consciousness, right? But there's the Council for Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission, right? There's like this nebula of all these NGOs and think tanks that are controlling them. And then you go beyond that, right? And you've got the Vatican, and you've got the British Roundtable movement, and you've got all these things, and you get into the 13 bloodlines. Like, we see further than we've ever seen before. And it's like, okay, well, what's beyond that? Like, we're on the verge of seeing what's beyond that, right? This has been revealed, over the last few years. Some people have been there for a while, but for the majority of us, we're fairly newcomers to this recognition of the reality that we live in. Okay, so what lies beyond that? Is it Satan, the demonic AI, aliens, just a really organized group of psychopaths? We don't know yet, but I think we're about to find out. And when you look at these, um, the techniques and the strategies that have been deployed and implemented, like, this doesn't work on human timelines, right? And to tell someone, to just come out, well, who are they? And then you just, okay, well, everything you believe is a lie. That's a bridge too far for people. So if we're able to fucking, comfort them, treat them with love and respect, a love and respect that they've been unable to demonstrate towards us, over the last little while, but help them along. I think humor is a great way of doing it. Like, yeah, Jeremy and the Diagolon meme crew and stuff like that. Like, we need those things, right? I think humor allows you to sneak stuff past the goalie. But if we can help people to come to the realization that, these things aren't real, right? We're powerful beings, and you look what's been done, man. Like, we're poisoned from the moment of conception until the time we go home. And that's not enough, right? When you're born, they inject you with more poison. And that's not enough, right? They poison your food, the air you breathe, the water you drink. And that's still not enough. They have to put you through an education system that destroys your mind and your ability to think for yourself. Meanwhile, poison you along the way at intervals, right? And that's still not enough, right? All our entertainment, the books we read, the newspapers we read, the television we watch, we are bombarded with this control and this mind-numbing bullshit every moment of our waking existence. And you look at these things that they've done, and that's still apparently not enough, because they have to destroy our economies and invade us. Do you do that against a weak enemy? You do that against an extremely powerful enemy, right? And people are starting to remember or figure out what we are. We're incredibly powerful beings. And I often, I've been thinking about this for the last year or so, like, what kind of man would I be had I not injected myself with 87 vaccines and gone through 20 years of public education, right? I don't know. But if we're able to create an on-ramp for the new ones that are coming online, because I'm going around, I'm seeing kids, they're born at home, they don't have any birth records, right? They're being schooled at home, they're being shielded from all the poisons of our world, and they're being educated. Like, this is happening everywhere. And if we're able to create an on-ramp for enough of these kids, these guys don't stand a chance. Like, this is done. So I'm extremely hopeful about this future. I've been like, dude, we're men. Like, we've been given the greatest fucking purpose that there is. Right. And I don't know, but I don't know when you took your oath. I took mine in 2002. And I don't remember what was said. I'm sure we said some bullshit about, swearing our allegiance to the crown. But in my heart, it was to the people of Canada. Right. And if anything is changed, my resolve is infinite. Like, I'm all in, much more than I was, back then, because I didn't know fuck all back then.
Yeah.
Right. But coming to the recognition of the world that we live in and the challenges that we face, it's like, all right, let's rock and roll. That's our job. Right.
Yeah.
And once you see it, like, dude, did you think you'd be doing podcasts and raging against the machine?
No, I did not think that I would be a social influencer post-military. That wasn't exactly what I was going for.
Yeah. Right. And I gotta be honest, I love nursing. I love being in the army. I'd much rather be a soldier and fucking taking care of you when the wheels fall off your life, in the emergency department. But they declared war on us. Like, I didn't pick this fight. I was busy serving my community, making a living, being happy. Right. I didn't pick this fight. You picked this fight with me. Picked the wrong fucking guy.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm all in. And everywhere I go, I run into people who see the same thing that I see, and they're all in too. Right. So, yeah, it might be a 90-10 or an 85-15, whatever it is. Right. Our numbers getting bigger every day. Their numbers getting smaller every day. Right. We're inevitable. The amount of darkness that we have to go through to get to the other side of this and build a beautiful world, that's negotiable, right? Like, I don't know what we're going to do. Like, you look throughout history, like we were talking about, like this, we've been here before. Like, this is 1917 Russia. This is Weimar Germany. This is end of Rome. This is where we're at, right? Our society is about to collapse. So how dark and how shitty and how prolonged it is, I think that's determined by how effective we are in doing the job that we do, right? And like we've talked about some pretty scary things, over the last little bit. And I just want to let people know, like, if there's people watching right now that are vaccinated, there are things that you can do to mitigate the risks, right? There's detox protocols. There's things that you can do. Like, I'm running around, like, it's hilarious. Like, I've been fired as a nurse. I have people calling me all the time. It's like, my husband's dying of cancer. My wife's got this, right? And we're trying to line them up with alternative therapies to be able to survive and be able to mitigate the damage that's been done by what's been done to them, right? I know, Dr. Trozzi, he was talking about private membership associations that they're setting up. Like, there's parallel healthcare systems that are coming up. There's technologies that are becoming available. All these things that have been hidden and suppressed, right, for the benefits of Rockefeller Healthcare and Big Pharma, they're starting to come out. We're starting to find them. And it's an incredible time to be alive. Like, we're going to see some crazy shit in the next few years.
Yeah.
Right? We're witnessing the beginning of the collapse of allopathic medicine, which is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and there's going to be a lot of murder and mayhem along the way. But people are recognizing this was built to keep us sick, dumb, and our lives short. And as we start to, pull these restraints off ourselves and remember who we are, these guys are in deep trouble, man.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I tend to agree that probably the main area of focus right now is on mitigating damage. we might not be able to control things right now, but what we can do is mitigate the amount of damage that the people in control are doing. And they can't really control anything either. They might think that they can, but it's really sort of beyond human capacity. And I think probably the most likely best case scenario is that we mitigate enough damage long enough for the whole thing to kind of fall apart, because it is going to take some time. And we still have something left to build on once it's done. We're talking about years, like you say. Like, we're in a war here. It's not a single battle, so we're looking at years, not weeks and months.
Seriously, man, like this, they've been building this cage since this phase since the French Revolution and the formation of the Bank of England, right? Like, this is a long incremental process. It took us a long time to get here. We've got a lot of work. Like, this could take a century to sort out everything, but like I said, we're inevitable. And if we're effective at being able to communicate with people, and I think every day that goes by, people are more willing to start to look, right? And like I said, there are things out there that we might be able to mitigate a lot of the damage that's been done, and we don't know the amount of fuckery that's occurred behind the scenes, right? Like, I did a speak in Calgary there about a year and a half ago, and I had a lady come up to me after and gave me a big hug, and she's like, I'm a pharmacist, and I was giving everyone saline. Like, they think they're vaccinated, but they're not vaccinated. They got saline.
Good
right?
for
She
her.
was just going around. She's like, yeah, screw
Hero.
this.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Like, I got a big yap and I got kicked out 5 minutes into the fight. Right. There are people that were quieter than me, and they've been in the system subverting it. There's good people in Pfizer. There's good people in the government. There's good people everywhere that see what this is, that are fighting this. And they've got such a good control on the dissemination of information that we don't see a lot of this stuff. But everywhere I go, there are good people that are on the same page that we're on. So I think we're about to see, I love that pharmacist too. It's people are standing up. And, like, why I do the things that I do, it's about a sense of love and duty. But I'm gonna, I gotta say, there's also some repentance there. I used to inject newborn babies with chemicals. Like, that's insane. But I believe my priests, right? They told me that's what I was supposed to do, and it was helpful. And I believe them. And the reason why I think it's so important to, stand up and publicly say these things is because when I was injecting those babies, I had coworkers who knew, and they were too afraid, and they didn't say anything. Right? I was fortunate. I was in 2019, the first time I ran for the PPC, I had a young lady come up to me and she put me against the wall. And I'm assuming she had a child with a vaccine injury, and she gave me some paperwork and she's like, you got to look at this. Right? You got to look at this. And I'm like, okay. And I looked at it and I'm like, are you kidding me? And I watched that movie Vaxxed, and I remember driving into work, white knuckling it, and I was enraged because I've been complicit in this. I had been a vector for harm to people that I was trying to help. And I didn't know any better. But there was people around me who did know better, and they kept their mouths shut because they were afraid.
Yeah.
And it's just like, we have to tell them whether they want to listen to it or not. Again, that's a choice, right? That's a choice. You can choose to be afraid of everything that the CBC tells you to be afraid of, and you can choose to think that we're crazy, right? It's just like, okay, all these thousands of people who have dedicated their lives to serving their fellow Canadians, right? have, you know, ruined themselves financially and destroyed careers they love because they're crazy. It's like, or do they know something that you don't, and they're trying to tell you? It's like, I'm not going to stop trying to tell you, right? That's our job. So, um, yeah, what a gift, right?
Yeah, it's an opportunity.
It is so.
Yeah, and you know, we're the ones who get to make history and, you know, shape the future for the better. So you know, there is that dark times ahead for sure, but it's a hell of an opportunity that we have ahead of us as well.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot of guys out there you see in the big hero complex, and I feel like I'm the first guy on the stack. That's the guy that gets it in the face. We're Charlie team, right? Charlie, you take the trench. Charlie, you do this, right? It's like, oh fuck, no, please. But we all got a root, right? Like the hero phase is when they write the books. We got to do the groundwork. So we got the right guys writing the books.
yeah, yeah, right on, brother. Well, that seems like a pretty good note to wrap things. I'm just going to vector you guys onto the V4F website here. Subscribe by clicking here. Join Veterans for Freedom if you're a veteran by clicking join here, and you can support us here. We're just doing the V4F donation right now. That helps with our operational costs, like my StreamYard account and the website. The support fund, which we were raising money to help Canadians who were suffering under this tyranny. That's been migrated over to the Accountability Project. And the Accountability Project is a federal not-for-profit with a mandate to advocate for human rights, including raising funds for public interest plaintiffs and class action lawsuits. So we're raising funds to step into this lawfare battle space at this point. I think that this is one of the key battle spaces. It's probably not so much on the demonstrations and the protests at this stage. Things are really migrating into the courtroom. So this is a really important initiative. Please, if you can, go to the Accountability Project and donate generously, and we appreciate it. And one more time, here is C.S. Lewis to round things out. He says, of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. To be cured against one's will of states which may not regard as disease is to put on a level of those who have not yet reached the age of reason, to be classed with infants, imbeciles, and domestic animals. And of course, we are not livestock. We're not domestic animals. We are men, as you said. We are humans, and we are worthy of dignity. And sometimes it is the case, it's always the case, actually, that rights need to be asserted, you know, and not gifted to us. It's never worked that way. So this is just our turn to stand and fight. And not give up any more ground than we already have. We have a lot of ground to gain back at this stage, but I do think the tide is turning, like Sean was saying. It's going to be a bit of a slow turn, but it's starting to move in the right direction. Sean, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a really informative chat and really pleasant as well. I'm glad that we have you on the PPC team. I'm going to the conference there this weekend. So this is my only stream this week. I'm back on the road here tomorrow to head out to the PPC conference.
Yeah, say hi to everyone for me. I'm not going to be able to make it out.
Yeah, that's too bad, but we appreciate you staying in this fight just the same. And yeah, everybody is singing your praise here in the chats. Thomas is saying, great show, Jeff. Thanks for speaking up and out, Sean. Yeah, we appreciate what you're doing, brother. And Evelyn says, thanks, Jeff and Sean. And Cindy was just asking, how do we donate to TAP? And the donation button is there on the main website. I guess I should have pointed that out while it was up, but that's I'm sure you'll find it. And she says, thanks, Jeff, and always hearts, as always, hearts. Sean, you are a fantastic man and a great guest. Thank you. And she's given us the victory, which is what this actually is. It's not the peace sign. It's what the World War II vets used to flash at each other for V for victory. And we got Canadian Goose signing off as well. And Debbie saying, thank you. Great information. All right, guys. I really appreciate everybody who tuned in tonight. And Sean, we all appreciate you very much. Best of luck with the fight going forward, brother.
Thank you very much. Yeah, may God bless and keep you. And I wish you good fortune in the next phase of this ancient war.
And with that, folks, stay frosty and stay safe out there.
Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs.